Welcome to the Council of Better Business Bureau's podcast, Better Business, Better Series, where we will explore top-of-mind topics with business and industry leaders to understand the leading trends and innovations that continue to push the envelope in today's marketplace.
For the Better Business, Better Series podcast, I'm Will Johnson. As we kick into the new year and look at the topics and issues that the business community is buzzing about, we wanted to explore a topic that's going to have a huge impact on the future of the economy, Generation Z. We hear a lot about millennials, but today's business owners can't afford to ignore the next generation, Gen Z. No longer waiting in the wings, but already making a big financial impact. It's reported that Gen Z will become the largest generation of consumers by 2020, so just a few years away, and also account for $29 to $143 billion in direct spending. In simple terms, Gen Z has a huge impact on the economy, and they're still pretty young. Joining us today is Jeff Fromm. He is an author, the president of FutureCast, a consumer trends consultancy, and has over 25 years of hands-on consulting experience with brands. Jeff, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Let's set the stage. Talk in general about Gen Z. What age range defines them? How would you describe sort of the general characteristics of Gen Z?
Well, if we want to look at Gen Z through a birth year lens, we could start at 1996 as the oldest of the cohort and sort of look from there. Some of the things that might be interesting to people, they're digital, social, and mobile to the bone, not a surprise, but their values are more traditional than many of the folks who are only 5 to 10 years older than them.
And is that just sort of the back and forth of generations or is there a reason why that is to attribute to that, or we can just assume that they have more traditional values?
And the research said they have more traditional values around hard work, and money matters to them, and so they are a little more future focused, perhaps, and thinking about how that might apply to them as they enter their working careers. I think that this cohort will also have their own unique generational issues in terms of things that matter to them. And that will, in some ways, diverge from other generations.
And what kind of issue, when you say issues, what does that mean?
Issues could range from things like millennials were really focused on the environment, and the word of the day was go paperless. Gen Z is very focused on inequality, and so word of the day becomes go genderless, and Nike making an agreement with Colin Kaepernick would be an example of a brand that understands how important that topic is to Gen Z. So there are ways they converge. They're digital, social, mobile to the core. There are ways that they diverge. Things like work hard for my money, values that are a little more risk averse, things like that would be some ways that they diverge.
And I was going to ask, actually, we're using the term Gen Z. Are other terms out there, or will Gen Z become sort of what they are called?
It's anyone's guess. We use the term plurals from time to time. We use the term pivotals from time to time. We use the term iGen from time to time. I've heard a variety of different terms. So I wouldn't want to spend too much time guessing. The reality is we're talking about people who were born in 96 and thereafter, and we're talking about folks who are just starting their working careers or starting their college careers or winding up their school careers.
Okay. And when you say 1996 is the oldest, I mean, then it just really runs down to the very young.
Teenagers,
right.
12, 13-year-old
right.
kids that are, rising into the high school years in the near future.
Right. And making purchases, or at least influencing others to make purchases.
For sure. I mean, there's a great deal of shin kicking in today's world in terms of who buys and who influences. I might buy technology for my family, but I promise I'm getting technology advice from people 20 years younger, not
Sure.
20 years older than I am.
Right.
And many of the trends we see start with younger people and then move up. And we call this sort of the canary in the coal mine effect. So Venmo isn't something that I was the first to adopt. But if you want to pay the kid who mows the lawn or the babysitter, you don't have Venmo and you write them a check. It's sort of kind of weird when they look at you and say, what's this?
Or, just mentioning any other sort of like pay app, right? They will look at you askance.
Yeah. So, but yes, younger people are influencing many purchase decisions because family dynamics have evolved. And in many families, we have a more pure democracy versus the command and control kind of family. And so maybe we're going to decide what vacation we're going to take, and they'll have a couple of votes, but the parents are paying. Or maybe we're going to decide just what we're going to go eat tonight, and they'll share us a couple of suggestions. Today's younger consumers are not monogamous with a single brand, but they do prefer brands, and they have preferred subsets by category. So, there are going to be key brands that are the winners in terms of share of frequency, share of wallet by category.
Okay, and I want to get more into specific brands because that's interesting as much as we can talk about it. Some businesses might mistakenly think that Gen Z, they're so young, they're 12 or 13, and then on up to, as you said, the oldest born in 1996, that might assume they don't have the buying power that they actually do. You've answered some of this question in that there's more of a group decision in families, perhaps, where younger people are influencing. But in general, why should brands focus on them, and where are Gen Z focusing their spending? In what categories?
Well, some of the categories would be traditional. They're interested in entertainment, music, and things like this. But some of the brands might be less traditional, right? So when you were growing up, if you wanted to make a playlist, you probably hit play and record, right?
Yeah.
That's not how they make a playlist.
I'm afraid so. That's how old I am.
All right. So the reality is, I think many of the categories are high interest to them, whether that's fast casual, meal with friends, whether that's music, entertainment, whether that's gaming and e-gaming and esports. And some are new, right? Esports didn't exist when I was growing up. So that's just the nature of how the modern world has, evolved.
Right. We're actually seeing like college courses or educational tracks that focus on things like that as well.
Yeah, I led an investor conference on esports in New York a few days ago with people who invest tens of millions of dollars on behalf of funds, and the only thing we were looking at were trends around esports and e-gaming. So
big business.
That definitely was not on the agenda 5 years ago. Having said that, there's still some very traditional categories around food, entertainment, travel, and things like that, where you are either buying or influencing. And they certainly all carry a modern-day Swiss Army knife in their hand. Anyone thinking that they're calling them back is living a delusional life. You're lucky if you get a text back. But that modern-day Swiss Army knife fuels a lot of technology trends, and those are not inexpensive devices they're carrying.
And if you look at brand consistency through the years, and you spoke a little bit about, their relationship with brands, but will they stick with one if they're doing the right thing in their mind?
I think that they have preferred brands for sure. And preferred brands have price elasticity and frequency of use advantages. So whether we're talking about Nike, Chipotle, or other brands, they have an advantage. That doesn't mean they're an exclusive relationship that is the only brand in the category. But, having an advantage on frequency of use and price elasticity can lead to extraordinary financial performance. Now, they're also pretty savvy folks. So while they prefer brands, in some categories, things are of lower interest, and they will trade to private label. So I might buy branded coffee and private label toilet paper. They're both in the grocery store, right? And it just varies from category to category. And that's in some ways how effective the brand is at creating value. They're willing to pay a price premium if the brand is seen as valuable.
And so what's a brand to do then to sort of reach out and attract Gen Z? That's a complicated question depending on the product.
Yeah, I think there's more than one answer to that question. That's a pretty complex question. What I would suggest is there are a couple of categories of brands that seem to have advantages. Network operators as a category seem to have advantages. That would be everything from Spotify to Airbnb to Venmo, because the bigger the community, the more it interests me. So Snapchat doesn't interest me if my friends aren't in the community. So network operators is a category that tends to do well with this younger consumer. Okay. The other is purpose-driven innovators. Purpose-driven innovators are brands like Mod Pizza, where I'm going to pay the same $8, $9 for my pizza as I would when I go somewhere else. But I know that when I buy products from those purpose-driven innovators, they're taking actions that are consistent with my personal values. And it doesn't cost me more, and they get a share of frequency and price elasticity advantage. So I think as a category, those are two of the sort of categories of brands that have an advantage, but they still have preferred brands, right? Individual brands from Glossier to Nike and many, many others. And what makes someone prefer a brand? Typically, it's the emotional connection that consumer has with the brand.
And then I'm assuming then that as tech savvy as they are, as they've grown up with mobile, the ability of a brand to build relationships in that environment, in that ecosystem, is really important.
Yeah, you have to understand consumer trends, and then you have to understand how to meet need states, or if you're in the food business, palate states, or if you're in the entertainment business, my needs might vary by day part, and so it becomes important to understand that consumers' needs can change. Even the same consumers' needs can change. What I might want from a food brand on Monday, health-wise, might be totally different than Saturday, where it's like, whoa, I said I was going to eat healthy, but it's Saturday. Party, And so I think it's important that brands understand consumers are complicated, and there's a big win for them if they win. It's called having an emotional connection, and that emotional connection is why somebody drinks a lot more Red Bull than another brand. And we see it again and again, right? These high-performing brands build emotional connections with a preferred group of users, and those users are just-in-time content sharers, and they recruit their friends, right? They act on behalf of the brand, and they do it by curating their social identity.
And it's interesting, you mentioned brands. I have one preteen in the household, and Nike, Chipotle, Mod Pizza, all of those brands are ones that are held in pretty high regard with him.
And he probably doesn't do calculus to say, well, gee, I might get the same quality from this other brand. And so, again, emotional connections are really powerful. The question is, how do brands create those emotional connections? And I think it's understanding the consumer trends, understanding the need states, and then saying, how can we do a better job as a brand to make sure we're adjusting and reimagining to be more relevant today than ever before? Because we have some pretty savvy consumers who want to spend their money, but they're capable of ferreting out which ones are the best brand for them.
And I want to go back as we wrap things up and, or at least discuss quickly. I mean, brands also, they may be interested in someone who's 15 years old, but they might, I don't know if your food business, it might run from 15 to 50. And so you can't leave out or forget or ignore the millennials at the same time.
Yeah, so one of the things we've done is research across generations among consumers 16 to 65 to look at the common themes that we see among Gen Z, millennials, Gen X, and baby boomers. And what we found, first of all, is about 25% of future financial performance is related to 6 cross-generational themes, and about 75% on average is pricing and distribution strategy. Now, if you compete on low price, then it's probably 80 to 85% pricing and distribution. And if you compete on differentiation, it's probably less than 75% price and distribution. So that's an average, and it varies by brand and category. Having said that, these 6 themes, cross-generational themes, are important. And many of the themes that we see that are important with Xers and Boomers are the things that start with younger folks. I want brands to be purposeful. I want brands to be accessible. I want brands that I trust, et cetera, et cetera. The reality is, once I see that, it's like, yeah, I want brands to be accessible too. I guess I could use my mobile phone to pay for things as well. So we see a lot of trends that start with younger people. Younger people are 2.5 times more likely to be the early adopters of new digital, social, and mobile tech, and they're more likely to be the spreaders when it comes to sharing information with friends about brands they prefer. So while there are differences across generations, there's also an awful lot in common, and I think it's very important for brands to understand what's both in common and what is divergent.
All right, Jeff. Well, we'll have to maybe have you back on to discuss the 6 themes you mentioned there across generations. That's interesting
I'd love
stuff.
To. Yeah, love to do it.
All right. Well, so the bottom line: don't ignore Gen Z. Know who your audience is and get smart about it. Jeff, where can people go to learn more about you and what you do?
You can contact me directly. J Fromm at thefuturecast.com. I'm in LinkedIn at Jeff Fromm, and my books are all on Amazon as easily found. Marketing to Gen Z, the most recent one.
Great.
So I would look forward to connecting with folks.
Okay. Well, Jeff, thanks again for joining us. And if you'd like to learn more, follow Jeff's advice. And if you'd like to learn more about our podcast, you can visit bbb.org for the Better Business, Better Series podcast. I'm Will Johnson.
You just enjoyed Better Business, Better Series podcast. Be sure to tune in next month for a brand new episode. To learn more about our other shows, visit betterbusiness.blueberry.com. That's betterbusiness.blueberry.com and subscribe. The thoughts and opinions expressed on this podcast are the views and opinions of the guests, not those of the Better Business Bureau, Council of Better Business Bureaus, or program affiliates. This podcast is for information and educational purposes only and is copyrighted with all rights reserved. This podcast is protected by Blueberry's terms of service.